So today's webinar is about who is building with AI in Australia today and who's really just talking about it. If you look at the current market landscape, it's changed a lot in a year. It's changed a lot. I remember last year, a lot of people were getting to know AI. Not everybody had Claude on their phone or GPT. Everybody was still experimenting. Nobody knew what AI could do. You also in the market, if you looked at YouTube, social media, anybody that talked about AI was questioning its capabilities, was questioning the hype, whether or not it could do X, Y, and Z. And now the conversation's really shifted. A lot of these YouTubers are now talking about the costs of AI. Does it actually deliver that much value? Can it offset all the costs that's going into it? And so the conversation's really evolved from the capabilities of AI, which the market now has accepted is incredibly powerful, to more, you're paying this much for AI, is it worth it? And with that, in Australia in particular, because Australia is traditionally, I guess, a late adopter of new technology, we're seeing a lot of people talk about AI almost like they are experts in AI, but they're not necessarily building it. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. Where is the building of AI actually occurring? And then as you build, what's failing? So what's not actually working out in these AI deployments? What applications that are being built with AI that don't really work out? And then lastly, of course, I want to talk about what's actually successful in the building of AI, what actually works. And so we'll end with what you could do to ensure that if you were to go down and build an AI application or help with an AI deployment, you'll have a good understanding of what's going to make that successful. But that's today's agenda. We're going to be talking about the AI hype. We're going to be delving into it quite deeply and understanding what is actually just talk and what is actually building. So we largely see, and I think a lot of you guys see it too, the conversation has largely outrun the construction of AI. A lot of people are talking about it. A year ago, they may have been accountants, they may have been doing other projects, but now they're AI experts. And we see right now, according to Gartner, that more than 40% of agentic AI projects will be cancelled by the end of 2027. And this is because the costs are blowing out. And I think that's being well spoken about right now. A lot of YouTubers talking about the rising costs of AI. A lot of noise currently about Claude and the new models consuming more tokens, maybe unnecessarily. But a lot of it is about costs. Soon, a lot of people will be talking about value. You're incorporating AI into a process that doesn't really need AI. And so there's unclear value of bringing AI to the project. And I think a lot of that's happening because people are just talking about AI. There's this idea of, hey, do it with AI, even though you may not need AI, right? And then lastly, I think this conversation will probably come later in the year, probably late, maybe November, December, where people have successfully implemented some AI projects, but they haven't taken into account the risks. Where is that data going? Because a lot of people forget they're using a lot of these AI models. Unlike software, where it could prompt you or it could send something to you automatically, these models operate by you sending it data first. So you have to provide it an input for it to provide an output. And so you really do have to manage the risks with that data flow. But that's Gartner. They predict that more than 40% of agentic AI projects will be cancelled by the end of 2027. S&P Global right now say that 42% of companies have abandoned their AI initiatives. This is an increase from 17% the year before. And you can think about that quite counterintuitive. You can understand that that's quite counterintuitive, because as AI has increased its capability and proven its worth, more companies should be doing more AI initiatives. But actually, it's gone backwards, which is quite a stark statistic to see. And then lastly, less than 10% of enterprises with AI agent pilots have actually scaled them to be working and delivering value, which is quite confronting too, and that's from McKinsey. So we see a lot of these AI deployments And a lot of people think, okay, well, the place where these AI deployments should really be occurring is enterprises. Enterprises have the money, they have the data, they have more data than everybody else. If you think about the big four banks, every time you transact, they've got a tremendous amount of data on you, the location where you're transacting, what you're transacting on, etc. The big enterprises have the most data, they have the most budget, they should be just absolutely killing it when it comes to AI deployments. But actually, we're seeing the opposite. So a lot of startups pretty much start with AI, and so they implement it immediately. They learn a lot about what works, what doesn't work, and software as a service companies, because of the landscape, and I'm sure we've all seen software's really taken a hit recently, they're all required to pivot into AI. And so those software as a service companies that are successfully pivoting are implementing AI at scale. We see that with our customers. So startups and software as a service companies, their token usage, their infrastructure usage for us just really skyrockets right off the bat. Our enterprise customers, on the other hand, are very, very slow. Very slow. We see probably 10% of our enterprise customers actually being genuine builders of an AI application. The majority of them are essentially held up in the POC. Some of them, which quite dangerously so, are actually just wrapping other applications. So if there's a software as a service platform that allows you to kind of drag and drop different models to have it interact with your application, they're using that, which is quite a risk, right? And when we're calling out wrappers. And then lastly, in enterprises, as you can imagine, a lot of them are just trading slide decks, right? Changing the color on the slide deck, putting AI in the middle. Um, it's funny but true. A lot of enterprises have a lot of strategy decks on AI, but not many of them have implemented anything. And I'll get into why. So what we see works is when people avoid saying just do it with AI, and instead they go down the path of what problem is this actually solving? And that's the key part of it. Don't just say, hey, implement AI or incorporate AI into XYZ. That never works. What is AI actually solving here? Is it saving you time? Is it making you more money? What is the pain point that AI is specifically targeting? That's so key to ensuring that that project remains on track to delivering something that the enterprise will actually deploy. Another aspect of it is you want to make sure that the data you're putting into the AI project is good data. These models need an input to provide you an output. And so you can't just feed it garbage. If you feed it garbage, you'll get garbage out. We see that a lot as well. Now, I will get into the other issues, but those two are the big ones that we really, if you just watched out for those two, that's probably 70% of your problems. Now, how do AU AI projects die? How do they not work out? Well, it usually starts with a POC using a US API endpoint. And I find this to be quite natural, right? I mean, if you look at how everybody's exposed to AI, it's through Claude, it's through GPT, they're already using on their phone, their laptop, etc. They might even have Copilot or Claude in the workplace, and they're all just using it. And so using a US API endpoint is quite natural, right? But what people forget is when they have Copilot or Claude deployed in their organization, they're given guidelines to say, hey, don't put this data in, don't put that data in. And there are a lot of controls on that application itself. But a lot of users don't know that. And so they think, okay, if I'm going to do an AI deployment, I'm just going to use Claude or OpenAI's API endpoint and just build it. They do the internal demo, everybody loves it. I mean, there's a tremendous value, it works out really well. They love the UI, just a lot of value overall. And so it's still going well. The problem comes when legal or risk reviews it. And now all of a sudden they realize they're sending customer data over to the US, or they're sending health data over to AWS. And that's when it gets tricky, right? And especially in a enterprise where not necessarily anybody wants to be seen as being negative, right? You don't want to be the blocker of a massive AI project that all the executives have now seen, right? And they love. So they don't want to say no to the project, but nobody's willing to take on the risk of the project either now because it needs to be re-architected. The data flow needs to now be controlled, right? The internal audit team or the architecture team needs to ensure that none of that data is being sent out of the company. And so you have people not wanting to own it and you have people not wanting to say no to it. And so the project really just ends up in limbo where nobody's really answering the question. It kind of does its cycles through the committees, but nothing's really happening. We see that a lot. And I think this is the biggest blocker with enterprise deployments because software as a service companies and definitely startups don't have to consider this as much. But if you work in the health industry or you work in a big enterprise with sensitive customer information, that's what you need to consider. It's very different to legal use cases where all the case law is generally public, right? It's open. It's open for everybody to use, and it's only your case that's confidential, right? It's if you're using a lot of your own company's data as the input to an AI deployment, you really have to have that risk data sovereignty conversation upfront. And so what does good actually look like? Well, the application layer, the UI needs to look really nice, really good. I think that's a no-brainer. You have to have a good governance layer, right? This means an audit trail on what data is going in, what data is coming out, what decisions are being made. A prompt registry. How could you categorize all these requests? Role-based access to not only the application, but the data that the application has access to. So you don't want a document being used to answer questions for people that should not have access to that document. I've seen that a lot, where they really just push all these documents in without thinking who's going to be using the applications. Your model has to be a checkpoint model. So basically it means that your model's not going to change randomly without you having control. If your model changes, the output's going to change. And so you generally want to be using an open weight model that you have control over. The data layer, I've spoken about this a lot, and obviously the infrastructure layer ideally should be within Australia, especially for any workloads that has sensitive data. That data really needs to remain sovereign and on Australian shores if you want to get through risk and legal. Now, two patterns from the field. Document intelligence is not something that a lot of LinkedIn posts are talking about. It's not part of a lot of YouTube videos, right? It's not sexy, if I was to put it quite frank, right? It's not something that everybody jumps on and says, man, this is what AI should be working on. But honestly, it's a very good use case that demonstrates AI's value right off the bat. It saves a lot of time for people using documents in an organization. And it's just a use case that works. You don't have to worry. And so I've got two companies that have implemented this, right? One's a massive organization, right, within the wealth space. They went down this path of saying, hey, we want basically Claude, Copilot, etc., access to the documents, start answering questions immediately, solves the problem of people looking through documents, trying to find data points. This is their AI engine, right? And they quickly realized that doesn't work. You need an actual specific deployment for it because all those documents can't be going over to the US. Secondly, then you can't be just uploading documents into each chat to interact with Claude. Well, firstly, it doesn't automate everything because now you have to find the documents that are relevant and you might have missing documents, right? But even when you put it into the chat could run out of context. And so in end-to-end document intelligence AI deployment is very relevant to this use case, where you have essentially a RAG pipeline that contains all the corpus of documents that are relevant, an automated push of new documents into this corpus, where at the front of it, you could have a chatbot or a Power BI or X dashboard that reports on all the documents and the intelligence that's contained within this corpus of documents. And so it really does three things. It does one, it consolidates all your documents, all your data in one place. It mines out the intelligence for people to interact with via chat or a dashboard. And then thirdly, most importantly, is you are now internally getting access and understanding to how your workforce interacts with these documents. And you start to understand what your workers actually do, what the team actually gets out of these documents. And that data being collected can then be built into a fine-tuned model down the track. But you can see how that document intelligence workflow, that use case, is a perfect AI deployment, because you can't do it out of the box, even though a lot of people think they can do it. And you also have to do it all securely, and it will be released because it adds a lot of value. It saves a lot of time, and it gets a lot of people information really quickly. And so I've seen this done for a big wealth manager in Australia, and I've also seen it done for small companies like a property operations group, where they essentially get tremendous amount of invoices, proposals, reports on how the building is going, and it's just a lot for them to manage. And so having this application there also helps them to really just get to a state of making decisions instead of reviewing documents. So those are two use cases. So those are two different types of customers that used this use case and were very, very successful with them. And that's what I think AI deployments need to focus on. It's simple areas where AI can add value almost immediately. So your Monday morning checklist is a checklist that I've come up with. It's just a guideline. Don't feel like you have to follow it word for word, but this is what I would recommend you look at if you're working on an AI project, or if you're going to propose doing an AI implementation. I'll let you review that. And lastly, the AI hype train it's really loud, right? If you're talking about AI and you want to get involved, I would suggest just jump in there, find a use case where you can answer all the questions on the checklist, right? You have to know what value prop there is, etc., and then just start building. Once you start building, you'll learn a lot. If you're already building, you probably don't need this webinar. You just probably need to watch out for the risk and legal consideration. You want to make sure that your data is not going anywhere that it shouldn't be going to. And lastly, obviously at SCX, we do sovereign AI infrastructure. So if you want to get in touch, feel free to reach out. The team here is always happy to help. And with that, I hope you enjoy your Friday morning. Thank you. Oh, yes. Sorry, actually, no. Apologies. I should be taking some questions. So any questions from the viewers? Do I think that success rates of pilot AI agent projects will improve over time? And what do you think is the single biggest change project managers should make to their POCs? Yeah, good question. I think it will get better over time. It will be, once both the developers and the project managers get used to AI and they've made all the mistakes, and because right now it really is just new territory. Everybody's learning and building at the same time. I think it will improve. People understand what to do and what not to do. I think the biggest change project managers can do is just realize that the biggest difference to a software project is that AI will have data flowing in and out of it. And so you want to ensure that none of that data is going somewhere it shouldn't be. That's the biggest thing. Just ensure that your data is well architected in a pipeline that you control. Everything is either done within an environment that you have complete access to and control, that risk and legal have approved, or you're using providers of AI that you deem safe. That's what I would suggest. How can developers best present to their bosses to get approval for more pilots and POCs? Honestly, I've seen this very successful. I've seen people do this very successfully. Essentially, you want to be the expert. You want to show them that you know AI and you can build AI, and it's not just something on your laptop. It's something that is scalable. And I think a lot of developers show that they are really smart, but their bosses don't trust them enough to deploy something that reliably works. And so you want to show a level of maturity where you're not showing they're just hacking things again on your laptop, but you're really building something that works, that has a public link, and that you've done it outside of work or you've done it elsewhere, and you could bring it to the company immediately. I would present it not as an idea or not as something on your laptop, but as a public link that the individual you're pitching to can access, because that just brings it to a different level of maturity. Have you noticed any major changes in project delivery from projects before major AI adoption, say 5 years ago versus now? I think so. I think project delivery back then, a lot of the work was in the build, a lot of legacy systems that nobody could understand, and a lot of time spent on testing. I think with AI, that's changed. If you have a legacy system that you can't understand the code for, you can get AI to do that. You can get AI to understand the project, understand exactly what that code is doing and what you need to change with it. And that was pretty much 80% of the work, right? Now that's largely automated. Same thing with testing. AI is able to help with the testing process to a great extent. Vibe coding is not just building things, it's also creating tests for you. And that automates a lot of the project. And so I think that's the major difference. I think the software side of project delivery is now much smaller. And if it's not small for you now, start learning how to make it small, because it's going to be made small really fast, and you don't want to be caught at the wrong side of that change, if that makes sense. But I do want to thank everybody for attending. I'll see you all next week, where we'll be talking you through some lightning demos that could show the capabilities of SCX Coda, which is a model that we just released last month. It is a sovereign AI model that allows you to do vibe coding at scale, and that performs incredibly well. So very relevant to that third question we just got. But thank you for your time. Enjoy your Friday. Cheers. Thank you.